Okay, recording in progress. That's a good sign. So we're here with Deep Images, and we're going to do something a little different tonight. Hopefully, something fun for you guys as well as for us. And we are going to employ a guest host, one of our original long-term cast members, and a linchpin of our operation here to host that and to introduce that. So, Bill Mulligan.
Woo! I feel like
Thank
applause
you.
is like a good idea right
Thank
now,
you. Oh,
but I
thank you.
don't want to
Thank you.
like kill the microphones.
I've been told that one of my many flaws is I'm terrible at taking any praise, but thank you. I've learned to appreciate where it comes from and not to be a jerk about it.
You're welcome.
We did the ones about the most disturbing films, and that dredged up a lot. And I just, as I'm listening to this, and some of these things are so disturbing, things I hadn't even heard about before. I'm like, we need an antidote, we need a cleanser, a palate cleanser after that. And I started thinking, so what about those films of the opposite, the comfort films? And it's like comfort food. Comfort food is not something, if you went to a restaurant, you spent big money and they brought you out comfort food, unless it's ratatouille or something, you're going to feel like, oh, okay, I got ripped off here, I could make soup at home. But it's, if you had to only go with one thing, you can't have creme brulee every day. But these are the films, you turn to when you need them. And look, it's no secret, 2024 has been just the most god awful year of my life. And it's only halfway through. I can't even imagine where this is going, and the hits just keep coming. I don't know if
With
it
you,
was,
man.
yeah, you do. And I think, well, you reach a point in your life where life takes more than it gives, and that's part of it. But I hear from people much younger than me saying the same thing. I don't know what it is, but I'm almost afraid to reach out to find people I've lost touch with, because I'm afraid of what I'm going to find. There's just some things, we had to put a cat down yesterday, which is that happen when you have 7 cats.
Yeah.
That's you got to deal with that.
Is it the one who always photobombs the worst with the big
No,
tail?
no. She's still here. She's still
Okay. I just want to make sure she was going to make an
Yeah,
appearance.
it happened very suddenly. But
I'm sorry.
but yeah, I know. I'm sorry. I don't mean to bring everyone down. Yeah, good way to start. It's just that there are some films, and they're not necessarily the best films, but they're the ones that you can go to at any time. And my definition of, for me, a comfort film is one where, if I'm just sort of running around, and of course now with Netflix you don't do that, it's you can just watch it from the beginning. But if for whatever reason I had to watch it from any point in the film, I'm like, yeah, that's fine. I've seen The Godfather so many times, I can literally just pick a scene and I'll go into it. These are films where if I just need a quick pick me up, I might go on YouTube and give me that scene from whatever, and I can just watch that. I know I know the pacing of it. I know every line of it. That's just the way they are. Now, the three that I've picked, I reached out here. I mean, one of them is a classic. I don't know anyone who doesn't like this film. It should be like the Turing test. I mean, if you don't like this, you're an alien or a Nazi.
Don't fail.
Yeah. Oh no. One of them is, by most rational standards, and I would guess most of the people in this group would agree, it's a pretty god awful film. It's terrible. It's pure Hollywood malarkey. It's trash, and I love it. And it's, to me, it's almost perfect. And one of them is a parody that is so good that it becomes legit on its own, while still being a loving parody, to the point where the franchise that it parodies considers it sort of canon. It's they're just the people who did these films, I guess what they all have in common is they are exactly what they were intended to be. They take you on a ride. I don't have to do a whole lot of thinking. Sometimes that's the kind of film I really like. But there are some times when I've been thinking enough, and it's time to just sort of sit back and enjoy the magic of cinema. So I'm going to start with the bad one. And by bad, I mean it's ridiculous. As a person involved in science, it should appall me. I hate bad science films, and there's a lot of them. And this one's got some of the dopiest science that has ever been put down. The characters are so broad. the everything about it is so manipulative, and it looks like it was filmed by someone who desperately needed their ADHD medicine, and there was none to be found.
Ouch.
Yeah, and I speak, of course, of wait a minute, let me get the year right. 1998's Armageddon.
Oh, okay.
Ooh.
Yeah. Okay. Now I will defend this film, which I have seen probably more times than any other film, because I tend to show it. You get toward the end of the year in school, and there just comes, those days when you got nothing prepared. The kids are done. You're done. Everyone's done. Hey, let's watch a movie. Let's watch a movie that has something to do with science. So of course I reach for this one, which is about as scientifically accurate as the Old Testament. It's Michael Bay. Michael Bay. Boo, hiss. Nobody likes Michael Bay. Michael Bay made this movie. J.J. Abrams wrote it. Of course he did.
Yeah.
And it's exactly what you would expect from a J.J. Abrams screenplay directed by Michael Bay. And if by some miracle you don't know what's going on, this came out in 1998, the year where Hollywood decided to make movies about asteroids about to hit the Earth. Sure. And they had this one and Deep Impact. And Deep Impact is a very, kind of serious, trashy one. It's not that good. It's got one good scene at the end when the asteroid does hit the Earth. Spoiler alert. This one has one of the most amazing casts that you could ever ask for. I mean, what's better than, we got Bruce Willis as the hero. We've got Billy Bob Thornton. We have Ben Affleck and Liv Tyler, and we have the gang, the army here that we take up to the asteroid. Will Patton, Steve Buscemi, William Fichtner, sort of the antagonist, but he's going to come around. Owen Wilson, he's the surprise early death. The late lamented Michael Clark Duncan. Again, who disliked Michael Clark Duncan? God, apparently, because he took him from us way too soon. Just a great bunch. And then even the bit parts. This is one of those films that is just perfectly cast. Perfectly cast, as is one of the other films I'll be talking about. And the premise of this film is that an asteroid the size of Texas is heading for us. If it hits us, it's the end of everything. Even bacteria won't survive. So the obvious solution is to blow it up. But in the one bit of science that they got right, if you just send a missile into space and try to blow it up, there's no gravity in space. So missiles blowing up things doesn't work quite the way it does here. There's no shockwave because there's really nothing to spread out. So what they decide is you got to drill into the comet, into the asteroid, put the bomb there, then blow it up, and that'll blow it to smithereens. And the problem is drilling is, it's a science. It's an art. That's an actual line from the movie. God help us all. So, they're stuck with two possibilities. They've either got to train a bunch of astronauts who I would say on average are probably in the top 1% of people on Earth in terms of intellectual ability and thinking outside the box and solving problems.
In reality.
Yeah. Or conversely, maybe go in a different direction and train a bunch of drillers how to be astronauts. And of course, that's the direction we go. So this wonderful film, we spent. Now, if you've ever read the book Save the Cat, Save the Cat tells you how to write screenplays, and it comes from the idea that early on in a screenplay, even if this character is kind of a jerk, show some redeemable quality. Like the first scene, and there's a cat in a tree and he takes the cat down. We instantly like him, and now So yeah, that's we get the save the cat moment. Bruce Willis is a oil driller, and usually those are the bad guys, but we show him early on. There's a bunch of Greenpeace people circling around his offshore oil rig, and he's lobbing golf balls at them, but he mentions to us, hey, he donates a big chunk of his money to them every year, and so right off the bat, we get to like him, but there's all kinds of problems. The young guy who is his protege is dating his daughter. Awkward. And we get all these things. Then we find out asteroid's going to hit the Earth, and we get the montage of training these guys to be astronauts. God, hell, even as I say it, it's so stupid. And then finally, the shuttles take off and land on the asteroid, and everything that can go wrong goes wrong. They ramp up the tension. Every now and then we cut back to Earth and we see some city destroyed. Apparently, landmarks are magnets for asteroids. because they could hit anywhere on Earth, likely to hit the ocean, but they don't. They hit Hong Kong, they hit Paris, they hit places where it's like, oh no, I never got to see Mount Rushmore, and now it's gone. They do all this stuff, and so we know, yeah, shit's real. And this is also one of those movies that has one of my favorite tropes, which is the 5-man army. We got Bruce Willis. He's the leader, charismatic. He's an alpha male. Will take the chance. He's going to make the supreme sacrifice. Again, spoiler alert, but if you didn't see that coming from the poster, I don't know what's wrong with you. We've got Ben Affleck, the second in command. They're button heads because, that's how these things work. But they respect each other. They love each other, but they would never say it until the very end. We've got the muscle, Michael Clark. Oh, yeah, come on, Michael Clark Duncan. Of course he's the muscle. Look at him, Jesus. We've got the one guy, I can't remember his name, but he's like the heart, the soul. He's like, he kind of looks like he doesn't really belong there, but he's really smart. He's got a gambling addiction and an estranged wife and a child that doesn't even know it's his. Yeah. So, we got that. It's all heart there. And then we got the brains of the matter, and that's Steve Buscemi. Perfect casting. Who's bugfuck crazy, but he's a genius. And with looks like that, you'd better be, So yeah, I don't need to tell you. All kinds of stuff happens. Every time you think, boy, this is just ramping up the crazy here, things get crazier. By the end of the movie, the asteroid, which is just a dumb rock, seems to be deliberately trying to kill these people. Stuff is happening that's so unlikely and so impossible that even the actors looking at each other like, did that just happen? It's great. It's absolutely great. This is the most manipulative movie I have ever seen in my life. We've got father, son. We've got father, daughter. We've got acts of heroism and self-sacrifice and all these things. And we've got a big enough cast that we can kill them off one by one just to let you know that we're serious about this, except for Owen Wilson. None of the deaths took me by surprise. And, it's filmed. It's filmed in a way that is just so crazy. The camera's constantly moving. There's lens flare everywhere. Why do one shot when you can do 12 in the same amount of time? And it's just like, oh my God, who edited this? Why? What are you doing? I'm starting to get a seizure here just from the constant cuts. It's crazy. I love it. I love the manipulation. I've always been a big fan of formula. Like, I've watched all the Bowery Boys when I was a kid. If you've watched one, you've literally watched them all. There is no difference. I think they just used the same script every time. It was wonderful. I love the Doc Savage novels, which actually had a formula. The guy had a formula. He's like, okay, we're going to change this. Then he wrote the stories. Right. Wonderful. And so Armageddon is just, I know it by heart. I know every scene. The special effects are marvelous. It's got some great, destruction and everything. But unlike some of the latter movies, like 2012, especially 2012, which really to me are just disaster porn, they leave you cold. I mean, 2012, we watched the entire city of Los Angeles completely destroyed, but it's okay because this one family in this one car managed to survive. Where literally it's like the entire city is crumbling behind them. Like they are, and I think this may be the actual, message of the movie. They are an angel of death because wherever they go, nothing remains in their wake. But we're supposed to feel good about that. And I'm just like, I'm seeing all these bodies falling out of these buildings. These people had families. What was their story? Well, we'll never know. At least in Armageddon, the deaths mean something. We got to know these characters in the broadest sense of the word. And it's there. So there you go. I just unreservedly love this movie. As terrible as it is, I love it. And I want to throw this off to who will it be? Who will it be? I think it'll be Justin, I say off the top of my head, like I'm not reading off a list.
But he's not here.
And he's not here.
And because he's not here, which shows just how much attention I pay to my surroundings here. And now I've totally lost my list.
Wait, no, I did. On the list.
No, I did. Okay, so maybe Justin was a bad choice, but you know who's always got something to say? Richard.
True facts.
All apologies to Justin. My choice for my first film and my criteria for comfort film it isn't necessarily a film that makes me get the warm fuzzies or feel like everything's going to be okay. Those films often repel me. I'm not. I love me some early Disney. I love Frank Capra, that kind of thing. But you know, I like to be challenged. Okay, my criteria for comfort is something that has watchability. I can see it over and over, and re-enter this world. And every time I re-enter this world, I catch something different. Something something I could have picked would have been the Marx Brothers' first film, Coconuts. I watch that every year at least. Forbidden Planet. I watch that all the time.
Yeah.
So
Great one.
comfort for me isn't necessarily a genre or a feel good. It's something I like to re-enter and revisit and re-examine like over and over and over. These are films I pull out when I'm sick, or if I have the flu, something I can just sort of, I know it and I can see it again and put it over me like a warm blanket. So my first choice, it might be interesting to some people, my first choice is a documentary, but it's not just a documentary. It's D.A. Pennebaker's Don't Look Back, which is a document of Bob Dylan's 1965 tour of England. And what's interesting to me about this, I like Dylan, and this is going to possibly piss some people off. I like Dylan a lot. I love Bob Dylan. I think he's a effing genius.
Yeah, that does piss me off. No, I'm kidding.
I feel that
I'm not a fan, I'll admit, but I have a lot of respect for the guy.
Yeah,
I like Bob Dylan. It's fine.
I love him.
This review might be for you, Henry, because I feel like his genius evaporated about 1966 and didn't really continue.
Is this his electric tour? First electric tour?
No, I'll get to this because I am actually going to talk about that because I'm going to reference a couple of other films. I
haven't seen it, so I'm ready to learn.
Yeah, I'm going to reference a film called Festival. Who did that? By Murray Lerner. And that was a documentary about the Newport Folk Festival.
Oh, yeah.
And the other film I'm going to talk about is Eat the Document, which is essentially filmed by D.A. Pennebaker, but directed by Bob Dylan. So I'll get to Don't Look Back. Don't Look Back. I have this fascination with 1965 and with mid 1960s. It's essentially the world I became aware. And I was born in 1962, started, kind of looking at the world about 1965. So another level of comfort for me is familiarity and a love of that particular era and what was going on. If you look at the timeline of Bob Dylan's career, he started in was a teenage rock and roller, got into the folk scene, ended up in Greenwich Village, made a name for himself as a folk singer, and pretty much became he was established as a performer first and taken seriously as a poet, and was considered by the time this film as a de facto leader of the growing counterculture. He was, everyone looked to him, everyone referenced him. He had met the Beatles by this time. He had taken LSD. He had smoked pot. He met Allen Ginsberg. So he was about as hip as you could be ever. So this film that dropped you into his tour of England, and his career had started changing. He was, as I said, taken very seriously as a voice of protest, which is ironic because he really didn't give a shit about that. He's a chameleon. He's a bit of a he will reinvent himself, and he's kind of slightly sociopathic. Again, this will piss off people if you're but this is why I find him interesting. One of the reasons I find him interesting, because he's a slippery little motherfucker. He will change on you. He's always saying interesting things, though. He's always flipping around. And the reason I reference that film Festival, because it's a document of the Newport Folk Festival sorry, I'm very dehydrated today. Newport Folk Festival from 1963 to 1966. And the folk scene, when you see that beginning of that movie, the audience is 100% white, 100% middle class, 100% squeaky clean kind of people with really good intentions. And as you get through 66, around the end of the document of these festivals in this film, The audience is getting scruffier. It's getting more, you see BIPOC people in the audience. You see, people, hair is getting longer. People are obviously on drugs. And this is a folk festival. And they have a really interesting interview with this guy, Mel Lyman, who was the harmonica player for the Jim Kweskin Jug Band. And why I mention that is Bob Dylan was possibly the most charismatic person other than John Lennon in the 60s. This guy, Mel Lyman, was equally as charismatic. And rather than continue in music, he actually started his own cult. It was called The Family, not to be confused.
Yeah, Mel
yeah.
Lyman.
Yeah.
I've read
Mel
about
Lyman
him.
in the Boston area. Yeah, he
Yeah.
started his group called the Mel Lyman Family. He declared himself to be God.
Yeah.
The
That's
reason I
fun.
bring this up is Dylan could have done this. If Dylan had started a cult in 1965, he would have made Donald Trump look like, I don't know, Al Gore or something, But the reason I bring this up is Dylan had that charisma. Everyone was looking at him, but to his credit, he wasn't interested in any of that kind of thing. And this movie points that out. So I'll talk a little bit about the basic timeline of Dylan's career in 65, because it's important to what I'm going to say. March of 65, he released the Bringing It All Back Home, which is a hybrid album, half acoustic, half electric. And in March 8th, he drops the single Subterranean Homesick Blues, which charted and charted big in England and United States. And there was nothing like it before in the charts. It's surrealist poetry. It's rapid fire imagery. It works as poetry. And it's a really, really cool song. And people still know this, still aware of this. Who knows what else charted in 65? Many people still don't. And okay, so he dropped that single, and he goes to England in April 26th to start his tour of England. The record explodes in England, and they reference this throughout the film. That his career, he's really, really obviously bored with the material. It's not a concert film. If you watch this film expecting to see riveting performances of Dylan at his peak, you're not really going to. There's snippets of him performing. There's a few full songs, but really he's bored as shit with his material, with his own material. He wants to do other things. He's clearly enamored of. He doesn't really want to talk to a lot of people. He's obviously strung out on various drugs. He's bored. But if somebody from a British beat group like the Animals shows up, he's very interested. Like he hangs out with someone's knocking at the door. Just a second. Well, hold on a second.
Terrible timing.
Someone's knocking at the door. Somebody's ringing the bell.
Knock, knock, knocking on Richard's door.
I'm really digging this though, because I love documentaries too, so it's interesting hearing about one.
You can edit that out. It was a random kid wanting.
No, we're good.
I've never met before, wanting to pick the flowers in my yard. Just some random kid. Anyway,
It's sweet that he asked permission.
It was very sweet. But
very sweet.
Okay, he's hanging out with Alan Price from the Animals, who had just left the Animals. And so every time somebody that's in an electric British beat group shows up, he's very interested. Speaking of the cast of characters, there's a great cast of characters in this film. And there's an interview with Bob Dylan's crony, Bob Newworth, who was famous really as sort of a professional scenester. He was a painter and a filmmaker and all kinds of things, but really he was famous for just being on the scene and kind of the hippest, sharpest wit around. So cast of characters is Bob Newworth, who's Dylan's sidekick, and he and Dylan obviously have their own little secret joke going at all time. They're making fun of people. And then there's Joan Baez, who is sort of his girlfriend at the time. Well, their relationship had cooled. He spends most of all of the movie essentially ignoring her and letting Bob Newworth needle her. And at one point, she just sort of, she literally leaves the room and leaves the film. You don't see her anymore. She gets pissed off and flies home back to the U.S. So there's Alan Price, who I mentioned from the Animals, who had just left the Animals and was hanging out with Bob Dylan. Many people might know him as the guy that scored the film "Oh Lucky Man" by Lindsay Anderson.
Yeah.
And then there's Tito Burns, who's this slippery British concert promoter. It's getting him good deals on what television outlet's going to have him perform. So then there's Albert Grossman, who's his manager. And Grossman is this big, imposing guy. Looks like he could and should have been a bouncer. He's sort of Dylan's handler, father figure, and just makes everything run. He's kind of thuggish. He was, for a guy that really essentially started the folk scene, he comes across as really thuggish and kind of gangster-like.
I thought a lot of managers back then were thuggish, like Peter Grant.
I think they are.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a thuggish business, and still is a thuggish business. They hide it a little better now. There's more glitz, maybe, but
Yeah. It's still like that. I have several friends who are musicians, and it is definitely still like that.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's the film has it's okay. I'll tell you, it was filmed with 16 millimeter handheld cameras, and I brought Bob Newworth up earlier because in the interview and the Criterion set, he is talking to D.A. Pennebaker, and he says, "Yeah, oh, everybody was aware they were being filmed, and a lot of people are like performing for the film." It sort of has this fly on the wall, but people are really aware of the camera. There's that 60s kind of verite, cinema verite of form to documentary where the cameraman's caught on film. It was very hip and hilariously parodied by what was that guy who did the movie Real Life? Did you ever see that?
Yeah.
With the cameramen are in these kind of like diving helmets.
Yeah.
They're supposed to be like unobtrusive because they're wearing these things, but they're always sticking out like sore thumbs. But so it's filmed on 16 millimeter, and the editing is just brilliant. It shows Pennebaker's genius, that he took this thing, which essentially could have looked like home movies, and made this riveting narrative with this fascinating cast of characters. And there's also there's great scenes of him, he's really bored and people are getting on his nerves. Reporters are getting on his nerves. I understand that because he's strung out, he's tired. Just performing is it's exhausting, even if you're not coming down off amphetamines as he typically was. But so when they get there, they start making references to this new guy, this British singer, Donovan, who we all know is the Prince of Psychedelia in the late 60s. But at this point, he was a Dylan clone. I mean, he wasn't that great yet. He was a good writer, but his music was definitely derivative. And so they keep talking about this competition from this guy, Donovan. And Dylan's really clearly pissed off about this. He doesn't want to hear about this guy. And he's just saying all kinds of shitty things about him. And later in the film, they have this big meeting between Donovan and Dylan, and Dylan's in a real bad mood. I'm pretty sure he was tweaking because he's twitching and stimming like crazy. And there's everyone knows the scene if you've seen the film, and people talk about it, where somebody throws a glass out of the hotel window, and Dylan just flips his gourd. He throws a magnificent hissy fit. You have this idea of Dylan, people revere the guy wrongly because he doesn't want to be revered. And I don't think he's deserving of the kind of adulation, just like John Lennon. They're very flawed people. They're brilliant creators, but very flawed people.
Yeah.
And so Dylan flips his shit, and he's fighting with this poor working class guy that just happens to be, I think, some hanger on of Donovan or something. And he says, you're a big noise, I'm a little noise. He goes, yeah, I know that. He's just really treating the guy like shit. And people are trying to calm the situation down. And Donovan goes, oh, I'll go clean it up. He's just like a little schoolboy compared to Dylan, who's all like amphetamine in New York, kind of street smarts because he'd been living in Greenwich Village. And he wasn't much of a fighter, I'm sure, but he knew how to, talk a line of street talk, And so they finally get the situation calmed down. So Donovan plays this song, which is a nice song. It's kind of kind of catchy and quaint. And Dylan says, okay, now I'll do something. And he plays, It's All Over Now, Baby Blue. And it's like, he so clearly has trumped this guy that it's amazing, because he has this look on his face like, okay, you want to see something, this is the shit. Because it was, and everyone's just like, the situation de-escalated and Dylan comes out on top. But there's another great scene with a confrontation he has with this guy, Terry Ellis, who at the time was a science student, but later founded Chrysalis Records in the late 60s. And the guy kind of deserves the lashing he gets from Dylan, because he's really being kind of a prick. He's trying to be very clever, and Dylan's kind of giving all kind of out to like calm down and quit trying to be the smartest guy in the room, because he's not the smartest guy in the room. And so it's just a great scene of him jousting with this guy, and ultimately he just starts taking the piss and then ignores the guy.
Yeah.
But what's interesting to me is the guy ended up founding Chrysalis Records later. Mm-hmm. And you see other people in the background. There's Allen Ginsberg, but he doesn't say much. But to wind it all up, it's fascinating because it's a series of, rather than a concert film, a series of interactions, of clashing personalities and sometimes melding personalities. And why I find it comforting is that it references that period that I'm interested in, mid-60s. It's great character portrayals, and it's black and white. And we bring that up because after this, he did, there was a film called Eat the Document that came out. The film, Don't Look Back, was filmed in 65, but wasn't released until 67.
Great year.
Yeah, in the interval, a lot had changed in Bob Dylan. So they tried to sort of replicate what had gone on with Don't Look Back with his 66 English tour. But it was all completely different, because number one, Penny Baker filmed the thing, but Dylan wanted to essentially direct it and then edit it. And he knows nothing about directing, nothing about editing. So what could, in the hands of Penny Baker, Don't Look Back didn't look like home movies. It looked like a brilliant work of cinema. In Dylan's hands, Eat the Document looks like somebody's home movies. And it's in color as opposed to black and white. So to me, I make the analogy of like, it's sort of like the Wizard of Oz, where things go into color. And the movie starts out with Dylan snorting something, either amphetamine or cocaine, and it goes from there. And it's mostly incomprehensible. And but it's also fascinating because it's that peak of his career before he had his motorcycle accident, which I think was probably some form of breakdown from amphetamines. Because I think he was on his motorcycle and something happened. He didn't end up in the hospital. There was no medical report, but then he disappeared for a year or so. And anyway, to wind all this up, it shows you what a genius Penny Baker was, that he could take something that was as chaotic as a tour and make a work of cinematic genius. So I'll let somebody else talk for a while.
Well, I'm gonna sound ignorant to know as much about music as I do, but my brain's not perfect. D.A. Pennebaker made another famous documentary, right? And about who?
Made quite a few.
Ziggy Stardust.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking.
It is also great. I haven't seen it in years, but it's a really good
I haven't
film.
seen it in years.
Yeah.
I've always wanted to see Don't Look Back though. I like a lot of documentaries from the 60s. I really like all of the Rolling Stones. I mean, I like all the Rolling Stones from late 60s, early.
Cocksucker Blues is great. I like
Cocksucker Blues is great.
I'd love to see that sometime.
Charlie Is My Darling, and of course, Gimme Shelter to me is just like it's its own story. It creates its own little narrative around the Altamont before it even happens, and they have no way of knowing what's really going to happen. And then when they replay the tapes, what they find out is the total not what everyone says happened.
Yeah.
Everyone says that the crowd killed this
Yeah.
guy. That's actually not exactly true. The guy was trying to shoot
Yeah.
Mick Jagger and kill him, and they
Mm.
took him down.
Hmm.
So, and the looks on their face is just like, you know, I didn't think you'd ever see such a human and humble
Hmm.
reaction from Mick Jagger. I did from Charlie. Charlie's my favorite Stones.
Got to say though, hiring the Hells Angels to be your security is not one of the smartest moves anyone's ever done.
Well, they
Yeah.
should have known that there was going to be a culture clash, but that's when
Yeah.
the Stones were kind of skirting between psychedelia into Satanism. So they were
Yeah.
kind of like trying to have all the, you know what I mean? They were trying
Definitely
to
fit the narrative. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, well,
Henry,
the other thing I've heard about that. No, never mind.
Henry, one thing I will say is you mentioned not particularly caring for Dylan. I was like you for many years. I didn't see the point of Dylan. I thought because I became aware of him.
Oh, I see the point for sure.
I became aware of him in the mid-70s, and I don't find his work from that period interesting at all. I didn't like the music, and I didn't see what the fuss was till I saw Don't Look Back.
Yeah.
And it was on the show
Mm.
Night Flight that used to come on US.
Oh yeah, Night Flight.
Night Flight, yeah.
Love it.
The whole bit with it starts out the film. I forgot to mention that the film starts out with the now iconic opening with him doing essentially a rock video for Subterranean Homesick Blues, and he's showing all these like cue cards,
Yeah.
with elements of the lyrics on there. And Allen Ginsberg and Neuwirth are in the background, just sort of kvetching around, you know, and it's brilliant, and it grabs you. I saw that on Night Flight, and I was like, what the fuck? This is Dylan. It's like, you know, this, and to me, I was totally into punk. I said, this is punk as fuck.
Yeah.
And because he's got
early Dylan, I think he
Yeah.
was definitely a groundbreaker, and you know his
Oh, yeah.
behavior during that movie that you described toward Joan Baez, it gave us one of the greatest songs ever written.
Oh,
by
absolutely.
Diamonds and Rust.
Diamonds and Rust.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.